So about 2 years ago, I did a video on a Halo Wars mod called Sarcophagus, and ever since then I wanted to revisit it and do a proper scripted video showing off the mod. Unfortunately for us all, however, it seems like the Sarcophagus mod has ceased development, and from when I last played it, while it was cool, it had a lot of issues, so I'm not going to be doing a video on that. But not to worry though, because over the last few years there have been quite a few Halo Wars mods in the works, including the one I'm going to cover today. This is the Halo Wars Leader Overhaul mod, not to be confused with the More Leaders mod, which is something I might cover in a future video. Leader Overhaul does more or less what it says on the tin, overhauling and changing the existing leaders in the game, mainly focused around adding new units and providing balance adjustments. In addition to this, we also get several new leaders to play as, including a heretic faction led by the Elite from Halo 2, not gonna try to pronounce his name. Then we also get a Grunt Rebellion faction for the ultimate Horde playstyle. The default Brute Chieftain is changed to Tartarus, then on the human side we get a fully fleshed out Rebel faction, which is something that is really nice to see. I remember a couple of years ago when I did cover the Sarcophagus mod, the Rebels were a thing as a playable faction, but they were more or less just the Wish version of the UNSC, with a couple of reskins and having the same exact bases and many of the same units. But here in Leader Overhaul, they have their own unique things, from bases to units to abilities. They can even call in Jackal mercenaries to fight by their side, which is a bit of nice lore-friendly detail. In addition to the new Human and Coveys factions, what would a Halo Wars mod be without a playable Flood leader in the form of a Gravemind? That's right, once again 343 fails to add playable elites to their games, and modders give us playable everything. The Flood as a faction is truly interesting in that the strategy you have to use when playing as them. The mechanics of this parasitic menace are completely different to that of any of the other vanilla factions, or even the ones added in by the mod. Instead of purchasing reinforcement or followers upgrades like you do with the others, the Flood faction will have you instead gaining unit population little by little with the more bases you control. Kind of an immersive way to implement the Flood, going from containment breach to infestation through the gameplay, and also a very nice way to balance them, as when they start off they're relatively weak, but once you get a second or third, or so help the other player's fourth or fifth base, the Flood will completely take over the map. The best way I could describe the playstyle I used when playing as them was early game horde rushing followed by late game turtling with a massive final invasion. It was quite an experience and a bit of a power trip. To add to this, the Flood can build almost anywhere on the map, with the little dispersal pods that you can drop from orbit, and you can just spread their nasty little fungus buildings all over the place once you have the resources. Something that, again, was cool, lore-friendly, and a bit immersive. New factions aside, let's talk about some of the balancing that I had mentioned earlier. You have some pretty standard stuff like big nerfs to the Covenant leader's health, which is pretty useful. I find too often in the vanilla Halo Wars that the Covenant seems to be a tad bit overpowered, especially early game as long as their leaders are on the field. Sure, there are some counters to it, but I feel like Leader Overhaul does a good job in making it so that if you are playing as a Covenant, there are more viable strategies than just leader rushing or building scarabs. Speaking of scarabs, one of the new units we get is a Heretic Scarab from Halo 2, as well as a special, never-before-seen variant for the Grunt faction called a Methane Scarab. In addition to the leader nerfs, scarabs, vultures, scorpions, and pretty much every other larger unit has also gotten a bit of a nerf in terms of how much they cost. For example, vultures in the vanilla only cost around 900 points, will now set you back 1,350. Scarabs cost more as well, and the biggest thing for me is the population cost of virtually every unit has also been increased. This is not something I'm a particular fan of. While it is true that you can increase your unit count beyond that of what is in the vanilla game, when one tank costs 7, that's right, 7 population for one tank, it kind of kills the mood of the game a bit and makes it so that more often than not, Halo Wars starts to feel more like Halo Small Battles, which is a little bit of a letdown. Aside from the costs of that, the turrets have also had their price increased, which again, not really something I thought was necessary. On the positive side, though, both the UNSC and the Covenant factions have been given a buff in terms of the leader powers. The Covenant previously had none other than their hero characters' abilities, whereas now they have a bunch. In fact, all of the factions do, depending on their leader. Grunts can now set up shade turrets, deploy mines, the UNSC can deploy squads of greenhorns, yes, that's a reference to Combat Evolved, there are dropships, the rebels can convert others to their side, there's a bunch of new abilities here, and they're quite fun to mess around with. The biggest thing with this mod, balancing and factions aside, has to be the new units. Even the vanilla leaders have a bunch of them. For example, if you play as Cutter, you'll now be trading out your Hornets for Falcons from Halo Reach, which is something I was so glad to see. I remember playing Halo Wars 2 for the first time and seeing the Nightingale and being beyond disappointed when I realized that they were just relegated to a support vehicle role, but yet they looked like Falcons, but they weren't quite Falcons. I always thought it was kind of cheap. So, seeing the Falcons in Halo Wars, awesome. Then you also have things like Revenants, Transport Hogs, Jackrabbits, Mongooses, Heavy Grunt Squads, Honor Guard Elites, Marksman Squads for the UNSC, finally giving them a long-range anti-infantry unit, Goliaths, Tanks forms, Ranged forms, and the list goes on. The variety of units here for each faction is insane, in a good way. Somehow the developers of this mod managed to add in loads of new units without making the game feel too bloated or confusing. In addition to the new units, something we also get that I've been wanting to see for a long time in a Halo Wars mod is new maps. Now, don't get too excited because for the most part, the majority of these quote-unquote new levels really aren't new. Many of them are just remixes of existing levels where the neutral structures are changed around, or maybe have some smaller base sites placed in, or maybe they change the map setting from day to night, or just the ground textures. So, like I said, they're not really new, they're just more of remixes. There are also a few previously 2v2 maps converted to 3v3, and we even got a bunch of campaign levels converted for skirmish and multiplayer, which is probably the coolest part. But that brings me to my next point. This mod is far from being bug-free. I did experience quite a few issues with pathfinding and units just not following orders. They wouldn't go where they were supposed to go sometimes. They'd just kind of get stuck and stand there, even on the vanilla maps. In addition to that, while I never encountered any issues with the next thing in skirmish mode, the multiplayer crashes a lot. The other night, myself and a few friends over on the channel Discord tried playing a few matches, and the majority of them crashed between half and 3/4 of the way through. I'm not sure if this is Halo Wars' antiquated engine struggling to deal with all the new features or what, but it's pretty bad when you've finally upgraded your population count, and then you go to have a big massive battle, and the game just craps out. It is for that reason that right now, while I would definitely recommend trying this mod, I wouldn't say that it's the definitive way to play Halo Wars. The controversial balancing changes, as well as the crashes and disobedient units, makes for an occasionally frustrating experience, but I suspect that will be fixed in time. After all, this mod has been in the works for years now, and it shows no signs of stopping, which for sure is a good thing, since I know a lot of these Halo Wars mods have unfortunately been abandoned. Despite the issues I mentioned, I want to stress it is pretty fun, it just seems to work better in skirmish mode. Except for the Rebel AI at least, and what I mean by that is that there is none. If you set an AI player to play as the Rebel leader, it will just sit there and do nothing for the whole game for some reason. Like I said, the mod's clearly unfinished, but I am looking forward to see what comes out of it in the future. That being said, I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like on it and let me know if you want me to cover some more Halo Wars mods or just RTS games and mods in general. Content with Halo has been a bit dry lately, mainly because at this point, I mean, Halo is in a really, arguably the worst state it's ever been in, and I just get tired of saying that. I feel like every time I do a Halo video, it's just me saying 343 screwed us over again, guys. Their games don't work, but their store sure does. And at the end of the day, I prefer to cover things like this. I like seeing what the community or other games that actually have passion put into them are like, because in my mind, Halo Infinite is just the most generic, bug-ridden, demon child slop of the modern gaming industry there is. So yeah, let me know if you like this type of thing, and I will certainly do more. I have a lot in the pipeline of things I want to cover, different games, different mods, just whatever. There's a lot more coming in the future. But that being said, that's going to be it for this video. Again, if you did enjoy, please leave a like on it. It really helps the channel out. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Join the channel Discord if you're interested. A link will be down below in the description. And as always, have a great day and stay safe. Goodbye.